Hey guys, Jake Carlson here, host of the Modern Leadership Podcast. Are you ready to focus on amplifying your leadership superpowers? Let's go! Good morning, my friends and fellow elite achievers. Welcome to Modern Leadership, the podcast where each week we sit down with authors, entrepreneurs, and leaders to explore their journey, diving into the ups, their downs, and ultimately the lessons they learned along the way. Our goal, of course, is to show that everything is figure-outable. And today's guest expert is Robert Glazer. Bob is the founder and CEO of global performance marketing agency Acceleration Partners, which has received numerous industry and company culture awards from Glassdoor, Ad Age, Entrepreneur, Inc. magazine, all sorts of places. Bob is the author of the international best-selling book, Performance Partnerships, and the brand new book, which we are going to talk about today, Elevate. Push beyond your limits and unlock success in yourself and others. He is the author of the inspirational Friday Forward newsletter, read by 100,000 plus leaders. I am one of them. I get it every Friday, read it every Friday. Around the world, each week this letter comes out. Bob is a sought-after international speaker on subjects of business growth, culture, mindful transitions, and performance. Today, he is our Modern Leadership guest expert. Bob, we are privileged to have you. How are you today?
Thanks, Jake. Thanks for having me.
Wow, so much going on in there. We're going to jump into this exciting book, Elevate. But before we do, give us a little personal to go along with this business background that we just discussed.
Some people want to start at the beginning, so that's easy. I am married. I live in the Boston area, and I have 3 great kids, girl, boy, who follow very prototypical birth order. And we're all pretty active. So we ski together in the winter, and I'm active shuttling them around to sports in the fall and spring, as is my wife.
Yeah, very cool. And are you guys Red Sox fans?
We are, although this is really a Patriots town right now, and you know the Red Sox are not having a great year. So it's I don't think I've watched a single game all year.
Well, the reason I bring it up is because I want to ask kind of this leadership perspective question to you. So a couple of weeks ago, the president of the Red Sox was let go. He was fired. And this is coming on the heels of winning the World Series. I mean, last year in 2018, I guess the season, they won the World Series. Then this year, they let him go. And I wanted to ask you kind of the mindset of leadership that happens around an organization, whether it's sports or whether it's just any organization, about letting somebody go on the team.
Yeah, look, it's never easy, and I think the goal is to not have it be a surprise, and to that it's really clear what's going on. I think we don't know. I stress this to people at our company. Otherwise, you don't know what happened behind the scenes, and so sometimes what seems pretty sudden might not be. But I think it's the leader's job to make sure that they're giving feedback, they're telling people where they stand, they know where they stand. You know, we're even our company moving to much more of an empirical system so that there's no confusion about where your boss or leader thinks that your performance level is, because you don't want these things coming out of the blue. Change is inevitable, but I think there's better ways to do it than others.
And I looked at it a little bit differently, a little different context of it, of saying that sometimes in sports, we see this more often in sports than we do in, more corporate settings. And that is letting somebody go at the top or in a senior leadership position to kind of shake up the team or shake up those around, to kind of help them to understand, hey, we've kind of hit a plateau. We've hit status quo, and we need to do something to kind of break us out of this routine so that we can continue to grow, get better, develop, and that kind of thing. Do you see that in your leadership development?
Yeah, I think if you're holding a team back, I think that is more, I use a lot of sports analogies, but I think that's more of a phenomenon in sports to just sort of shake it up. Like we need something different. To me, like the job of a leader is to lead. And if someone is not doing an effective job leading their team, most notably the feedback of their team is that they're not doing a good job, then it's really hard to have that person in a leadership position.
No question. All right. Well, I got to be honest with you, Bob. I am obsessed with Elevate, this book, Push Beyond Your Limits, Unlock Success. I love it. I picked it up again. I have a copy of it. I got a pre-copy of it, actually. And I picked it up again just to kind of review for this episode. And I found myself rereading the entire book. I think it's so wonderful. But give us an idea of what was going on as you thought, this is a book that needs to be written. And then we'll jump into kind of what's inside it.
Yeah, so that's actually not what I said. And I got there by accident, which is how a lot of things happen. So Elevate actually started from Friday Forward, and Friday Forward started as a note that I sent every Friday to our team of about 40 people at the time. And I decided I'd just write this note, and it would be I had been developing a morning routine. I had read a lot of stuff around reading things that were positive, and the positive stuff I was reading was just not the type of motivation that I like. It was a little too like fluffy for me. So I started writing these notes, and they were kind of they were about improvement or change, but they were a little bit of challenge in them. I didn't think anyone was reading them. Soon people started telling me, oh, I sent this to my mom or my dad, and I'm sharing it with my husband and his company, and it's like, oh, people like these. And so I was actually, it was great because it gave me more of a connection to my team. I was at a conference, and I was talking to some other CEOs about some best practices. I said, I've been writing this note to my team, got great feedback. You should try it. A bunch of them said, great, send us an example or send it to us. And I sent it to them, I add them to the list, and one actually started his own version and does it till this day. And the others decided, hey, like good entrepreneurs, I'll just forward this around our company every week or put it in Slack. And then I realized, oh, maybe other people would be interested. And I shared it with a few more people. And at that point, people were asking me to join it, and I really didn't have a way to do that. So I set up a very simple newsletter template. I bought a cheap WordPress website because that you couldn't find the old ones because they were all sort of in emails if you didn't get the email. And I renamed it Friday Forward because people were forwarding it. And fast forward 4 years, it's about 100,000 people around the 60 countries read that every week, which still blows me away. But in getting all these messages from people on Friday Forward and see the change that they were making, I decided I would write this book, and it would be a compilation. It would be sort of the learnings of this Friday Forward experiment and sort of a best of. And I took it to a few agents, and they resoundingly didn't like it and said, love the writing, but people don't buy compilation books. So come up with a real book based on this, basically, to paraphrase. And so, you know what, I went and I sort of wrote, I tried to figure out what the overarching principles were that had made Friday Forward work. And at the same time, we had been following the strategy of our company, which had been growing about an average of 30% over 10 years on building people up holistically. And we were just making them better. And then we were getting the business benefit of it, and they were getting the benefit outside of work. And these two things sort of converged. And so the first draft I wrote, and this goes to a direct principle in the book about resilience and keep going if it's important to you. I had like these 7 steps, and I had a lot of the stuff, and it was too complicated. And I just kept talking to people about what are these elements of improvement. I really settled on this concept of capacity building. These terms around energy are used a lot around energy. It was spiritual and mental, and finally I really settled on these 4, and it just was perfect. I was like, wow, this is what Friday Forward is, and this is what we've been doing in our company as a leadership development strategy. And I took all the content, I sort of re-architected that. I mean, I remember writing this on a VW bus in the middle of Australia in the middle of the night because I couldn't sleep with my family on vacation. So that's actually the true story of how Elevate came to be. So I actually it's a little meta in that it has a lot of the actual processes of the book in it.
It sounds like as you were talking that there was this pull, that you felt pulled to do this. And I think sometimes in leadership, we try to orchestrate something. We really try to push something on our teams, or we try to push a project, or we try to push a marketing theme, or we try to push, as opposed to looking back and seeing what our audience, what the people around us, what our readers, when it comes to this Friday Forward, what they're pulling us or asking us to do. And it sounds like this book was really a pull to do this.
Yeah. And I think it's the same principle across individuals and teams, right? I had a sort of vision for this, and I really wanted to figure out how to get there. I think that the struggle that leaders have, and where they have to push and not pull, is when they they don't create a compelling vision or sort of a why, or people don't understand. You shouldn't have to push people or pull them, I guess, and depending on how you're using it. If they know where you're going, they know why you want to go there, and they want to follow, right? If you're yanking them along, then something is wrong. Look, some people need to be pushed out of their comfort zone. You need to disagree. But if you have this perpetual state of dragging people to what it is that you want them to do, that's really management. That's not leadership.
So let's jump into this book. You talk about how through the Friday Forward, you identified these 4, what in the book you call capacities or elements of capacity. Let's jump in. What are these 4 elements? And then let's dive in a little bit. I want to ask you to tell some stories from the book.
Perfect. So let me walk through them, and then we can dive into whichever one you want to dive into. But so spiritual capacity, and I think these go in a logical order in terms of sort of a hierarchy. Spiritual capacity is about understanding who you are, what you want most, and the standards you want to live by each day. It's really about understanding your core values or your core purpose or your why, which it's become to known. Intellectual capacity is about how you improve your ability to learn, think, plan, and execute with discipline. So this includes things like having a commitment to improvement, a growth mindset, being proactive, setting short and long-term goals, establishing routine and your habits and accountability. Physical capacity is your health, well-being, and physical performance. So this includes maintaining health and wellness, getting sleep, managing stress, embracing competition, and building resilience. And then last but certainly not least is your emotional capacity, which is how you react really to the outside world, which I think includes challenging situations, the mindset you keep with things you can't control, and the quality of your relationships. And for most people, this includes overcoming self-limiting beliefs, dealing with discomfort and challenge, having a positive attitude, and keeping meaningful and fulfilling relationships.
So when we look at these 4 capacities, let's take a step back now and say, okay, what is capacity building and why is it important? And then how do these 4 kind of function into that importance?
Yeah, so capacity building is how you get better. It's the method by which I think individuals seek to acquire and develop the skills and ability to perform at a higher level in pursuit of their innate potential. And that's the key aspect. It's really about them, their potential, and what they want. It's not about doing more. It's about doing more of the right thing. So I think that if you think about something like, I think that people tend to think in these realms of, particularly around spiritual, intellectual, and emotional, that you sort of have something or you don't. But think about physical. So I can't, do 10 reps of 50 pounds. So I start doing reps every day for 3 months, and suddenly I can do 20 reps of 50 pounds when I didn't even think I could do 10. I've built the capacity to do it. And it's easier and frankly, it requires less energy. It's actually that same process with these other things in terms of figuring out who you are and what you want, improving your discipline and some of the things intellectual, and then dealing with the outside world. And I think a lot of times there's some excuses around these things. Oh, this person has more time or smarter or better, has some advantage. And frankly, those are a lot of excuses. I think when we see these people achieving at a high level around us, they're really elevating themselves. It has more to do about their own fulfillment than it does that they have some advantage over us. And when I looked at these things consistently across high performers, everyone I talked to who was just really at the top of the pinnacle of whatever they were doing, they were very consciously working and improving in these areas.
And so let's jump into one of these 4 areas. You start off with the spiritual. This is discovering your why and your passion. I love your story of how you went on this journey. So give us just kind of a sneak peek into it.
Yeah, so I was at a conference in Argentina, actually, with my wife and a leadership group that I was in, and the keynote speaker just kind of bombed, the opening keynote speaker. And so we happened to go to this secondary track, walked out of that session, and there was this guy in there, Ridgely Goldsboro, who was helping people discover their why. And he had these archetypes, and he would ask them a couple questions from personal and professional, and he would look at the 2 patterns. In about 10 minutes, he would say, this is really your why and who you are, one of these archetypes, and this is why you do what you do, and you kind of can't help yourself. And they would just And the looks on their face was priceless. I mean, they'd be like, "Well, you just explained to me something I sort of knew, but I could never explain about myself." And he did this for a couple of people and went through the process. And I ended up chasing him down, having lunch with him, forcing him to do with me and my wife, and then bringing him to my company to do it for everyone in our company the next year. And it was ended up sort of being a purpose or a value, but I'm someone who's always been values-based, and I describe figuring out core values as kind of a self-actualization process, in that I think most of us know and feel our core values. When we get way out of line or we're out of alignment, it's kind of like the car in a tunnel, dark tunnel, hitting the side of the wall. Like, we know we're hitting the wall. What we just didn't know was where the dotted line was. And I think our values for a lot of us have probably been the same since our formative age in our childhood. We just can't articulate them. We know them when we hit the wall or we go to the other wall and then we hit the other wall. But then our car looks pretty beat up. So when you're able to really like write these down, put them on your desk, and use them to make decisions, like, man, your life really improves in a meaningful way.
So in your book, you actually have some action steps that the readers can go through and really help them to narrow down or identify what they're passionate about, what their values are, and try to see that dotted line as they go down the tunnel so that they're not bouncing off the wall. And is this something that we should be hiring an outside coach or professional to help us walk through? Or is this something that, as we use your book and some of the materials that you've provided, the resources, that we could start to do on our own?
Yeah, you should start on your own, because it's probably a lot cheaper than most people. And it's funny, there's not really an expertise in this. Like, I don't think you'll necessarily find a core value coach. You'd find a lot of coaches who believe in this, but I think some of the tips in there will get you to the 80-20. And one of the things about the book is that there's a QR code and it links to a resource section where we're constantly adding resources and more things that you can do for you if you really want to hone in. But there's some exercises in there that I've taught to our company that I've used that are really helpful, that I think will start to get you in the ballpark. And I know, look, it took me 6 to 12 months to be able to put my labels on it and feel comfortable, but I still made progress when I had the working prototype where you say, look, there's something in this theme of gratefulness or gratitude or something I haven't nailed, but I know this is one of them. And so there's some simple things you can do there. And the resources in the book are designed in like things you can go do tomorrow and things that, you can probably do over the next quarter.
Yeah, and as we shift gears a little bit and head on from the spiritual to the next one, intellectual, which is where I find this is something that I resonate with. I'm passionate about intelligence and study and education and development of intellect is so important. And I come across this story in your book about Sheryl Sandberg and Kim Scott. And I'd love to have you share just a little bit of that story for us here on the podcast.
Yeah, so this actually covers a lot of things. This covers emotional capacity, like, how you get feedback and deal with others. But Kim Scott worked for Sheryl Sandberg at Google, and she was overseeing AdWords, and she was crushing it. Her team was doing amazing. And she walked into a meeting with Eric Schmidt, the CEO, and gave a report and left the meeting and thought that she had done amazingly because the business unit was great. And Sheryl pulled her aside in the hall after and said, Kim, you said a lot in that meeting. And Kim said, thanks, and sort of tried to brush her off and, and sort of get her ignored. And Sheryl said, no, like, Kim, I don't think you're hearing me. Like, you said about every other word. And while you have great things to say, it makes you sound stupid, and you're not. And she really said it from a place of love and caring. She said, I'd love to get you a coach and work that out of your vocabulary so that you sound better and have more credibility. And Kim actually really hurt her after she said this, went on to work with a coach, eliminated it. And, today a lot of people are sort of afraid, I think, to push people. We've lived through the helicopter generation of parenting. But here's a great example where Kim went on to found a company called Candor Inc., based on this experience, write a best-selling book called Radical Candor, and developed this amazing framework and is a keynote speaker globally on how to have honest conversation. So it's a great story on how that one kind of honest conversation about, hey, here is how you can improve, and then let me help you improve. And she went from something she wasn't good at to making it literally her career.
And that's what I love about reading this book, Elevate, is because you take these stories and you take that one And you could unpack it in so many different ways. You could talk about Sheryl as the leader and how she was leading her team. You could talk about Kim and as the recipient of candor, or as the recipient of this suggestion for improvement, and how she used that to improve in her life and in her career. You could also talk about it how, as an organization, if we're all moving in the right direction. There's just so many things that we could unpack in this one story. And that's what I find fascinating about the book Elevate, is you've taken these types of stories, thrown them all in this book, and you continue to grow and learn as you read through it. And of course, Bob, we don't have the time to talk through all four of the capacity building elements: spiritual, intellectual, physical, and emotional. But I wanted to just take just a minute and ask you about the physical and why the physical is so important and how it relates to all of this other stuff that tends to be more intellectual or internal.
Yeah, well, if we're doing all this stuff, I think the physical could really be either the anchor on your life or the accelerant on your life. So, I talk about this fictitious person in the book, Steve, right? So Steve's, drinking too much, not exercising, not sleeping, all of these things affect performance. And I think when you think about it, if you are getting sleep, you're maintaining your health, you're keeping your stress lower, how this crosses, and you learn faster, you have more patience for the people in your life, things slow down. And as I said, we only get one vehicle to carry us through life. And if we don't take care of that vehicle, it's gonna make that road really bumpy.
Yeah, and as I do a lot of coaching with the people that I do coaching with, when I find that they're having struggles adapting or finding struggles in coming up with the right solution, I often ask them to go out and do some exercise, really to get that blood pumping, because it has not just a physical effect for health, but it also opens up your mind and gives you opportunity to think maybe outside the box or differently than you would have before. So, Bob, this book, absolutely tremendous. I can't praise it enough. I do have to share a couple of things that I found absolutely amazing. Bob Berg called it a masterpiece. Dan Pink said, if you're looking for a mentor, here it is in book form. I think it's amazing to have these very well-known, incredible leaders talk about your book. And it could be these two. It could be Sheryl Sandberg. It could be Kim Scott. It could be anybody talking about your book. And I wanted to ask you on a personal level, how does it feel when you put something out into the universe, when you put something out into society, and then you have this feedback positive from these great leaders?
Yeah, it's awesome. Particularly as I said, it comes full circle, right? I put it out to people for 3 years and I got a lot of constructive criticism, but I was open to that, right? I made a lot. I mean, I had a personal kind of board of advisors who tore it apart and edited it and all that stuff. So yeah, I mean, it's really, it's nice when, and I think that's why you take the feedback. Because if the outcome was important to me and making an impact was important to me, then I should take any feedback that helps me get there. So I'm really happy that it resonates with people. The biggest thing that, I'd be excited about is people say, I read it and it helped me, not that they bought it or that's really secondary to they had it in their hands and it made a difference for them. Because I think, we're living in a world now where it's just a lot of negativity. People are using a lot of energy knocking each other down. And I think there's just a real opportunity. We can all kind of help each other elevate and take it in the other direction.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful looking book. So we're going to link it up as far as where to get it on the show notes. But when you open up this book, it's got great pictures. It's got bolded words, highlighted words, box quotes out. I mean, it's a very easy way to read and consume this information. And so we're going to put all that on the show notes, Bob. But now we need to change gears a little bit and talk about my favorite section of the podcast, learning from leaders. Are you ready?
I'm ready. I feel like I'm under the gun. Under the gun. Our first question then is the book currently on your Kindle or bedside table. What are you reading? I'm mostly reading my book, but I have a large pile. I'm actually rereading Peter Drucker's Effective Executive again, since with a lot of these books, you only get through half of them, and it really is timeless wisdom. So I've picked that up and I've been reading it again.
Well, and don't you find that some of these books as you read them later on or in different scenarios, different circumstances, the different things jump out. When you're leading a team of 40, there's some things that jump out and resonate with you. But when you're writing a letter to 100,000 plus people and running a podcast and all the great things that you're doing, other things jump out and you can build and grow on those things.
Yeah, and you read it at a different point in your life, and you get different takeaways. But that is probably a top 10 leadership book of all time.
Wonderful. Our next question then is your leadership superpower.
My leadership superpower is relating to people and really understanding their perspective and where they come from. I find a lot of times people send people to me, whether it's a client or otherwise, and they're upset or frustrated, and I just listen to them and I kind of understand their perspective, which allows me to then help them in some way.
And that helps them open up more to receive your guidance, your feedback, your coaching. Whereas if you attack it without relating to them, it kind of bounces off. Almost in a scenario where we talked about Sheryl Sandberg, not that this was the same situation, but it didn't sink in until you kind of grab someone by the shoulders, look them in the eye, really relate to them, and they know from your heart you're trying to take them to the next level. I think that's a tremendous leadership superpower. Our next question then is a motivational quote, philosophy, or mantra, something that you live by.
My absolute favorite quote and mantra is, how we do anything is how we do everything.
And why is that so important? Is that your favorite?
It ties to a lot of the core values of our company. And I just think that, a lot of times we're looking for the overnight success. And when you dig into anything, whether it's Friday Forward or someone's career, or otherwise, you just find, a lot of small steps of excellence and doing things well. And we all want to believe there's just this silver bullet. But I just think that it was one of my favorite Friday Forwards about Anne-Marie Cow, who just made great copies. And that actually, when she was an intern at Yale, and that ended up basically connecting her to the CEO of HP and launching her career. And look, we can't control everything, but we can control what we do. So when you do something, just do it to the best of your ability.
Our final question then, as we're looking at our bookshelf, we've got Elevate sitting right there. What do we have sitting next to it as the book that you most often gift or recommend to friends, family, and colleagues?
Yeah, the book that I really love that I tell everyone to read is this book called Mistakes Were Made, But Not By Me. And it is the book about cognitive dissonance. And this is a topic I actually talk about in Emotional Capacity. But I think cognitive dissonance is one of the most powerful psychological forces out there. And it is a big part of emotional capacity. It's a big part of why we make bad decisions and why we repeat our mistakes. And the book really goes into it. And if you can understand it and you can see cognitive dissonance in yourself and others, it really, really improves your decision making.
Well, Bob, this has been a tremendous episode. I love diving into Elevate. I think what you've put together over the years, because this isn't just something that you did this year, it's something that you've built up to, is absolutely amazing. It speaks to me. It resonates with me. Before we let you go today, is there any last bit of guidance? And then where can we pick up Elevate and get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can find all things Elevate at robertglazer.com. The book's at robertglazer.com/elevate. And I just actually moved Friday Forward to that location, and the Elevate podcast is there as well. So you'll find links to buy it, but it's available everywhere online, Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, Books A Million, Apple, and other ebook providers. So you should find it out there if you're looking for it on a global basis.
Very cool. And any last bit of advice before we let you go today?
Figure out what's most important to you and then really focus your life in that direction, and it will make a huge difference.
Well, you are truly an expert. Thank you for coming on the Modern Leadership Podcast. We are better for it. Have a terrific day.
Thanks so much.
All right, my friends. Did I say that I liked the book Elevate? I'm not sure. Maybe we'll have to go back and listen, see if I mentioned that I love the book. It's amazing. I've got it right here up on my screen. I've got a digital copy, and it's just a great storytelling book that drives us towards building capacity. How do we get better at the things that we want to do in our lives, and really focusing in on these 4 key quadrants: the spiritual, the intellectual, the physical, the emotional. I'm not sure if it's just the timing of recording this episode, but this is a topic that has been on my mind. And so I just really appreciate Bob coming on and talking about Elevate and his company and all that he's doing, his Friday Forward newsletter. Of course, everything that we talked about can be found on the show notes for this episode, jakeacarlson.com/ML149, episode 149. Next week, we'll hit 150. Imagine that. Until then, have a great day, make a great life, and remember, everything is figure-outable. Thanks for listening to the Modern Leadership Podcast. You can find me on Facebook at Speaker Jake, on Twitter at Jake A. Carlson, and of course the website, jakeacarlson.com. See you there.